What is up, everybody? Welcome to the tutorial for how to play Pass the Anthrax. First, open the box by pushing the top flap straight up. Unfold the box, remove the cards, and set the box to the side. We'll come back to it in a minute. There are three types of cards in the pack: letter cards, non-letter cards, and description cards. There are two description cards, and they can be identified by the white background on the card. These cards explain what non-letter cards do, so you may want to keep these close for newer or unfamiliar players to reference during play. Non-letter cards are the bulk of the cards in the game, and can be identified by the skull-faced mailman on the back. Non-letter cards are used for defense and to pass letter cards to other players. Letter cards can be identified by the notably less dead mailman on the back. There are two types of letter cards: You Survived and Anthrax. These will be explained in detail as we go along. Now you know what the card types are, so let's move on to the setup. Pass the Anthrax can play up to 12 players, but when you have that many players, setup changes a little, so let's start small and keep it simple. Step 1 is to gather letter cards equal to the number of players. For our example, we will run a 4-player game. There must always be one Anthrax card in play at all times. So in a 4-player game, your letters will include one Anthrax card and 3 You Survived cards. Remove the rest and set them outside of play. Shuffle the in-play letters face down and deal 1 to each player. However, do not look at these cards. Other cards will make you do this as the game progresses. Now that everyone has a letter in front of them, gather the non-letter cards you need for the number of players that you have. You do this by looking at the number in the lower right corner of the picture. This number means that this card will be used in games involving this number of players or more. So, since we're playing a 4-player game, include any cards labeled 4+ or below. Remove all cards numbered 5+ or higher and set them outside of play. Now that we have our deck, shuffle those cards and deal 2 to each player. You will always have 2 cards left over. Place these cards in the discard pile. Next, determine who will be the first player. You can do this in any number of ways. You can choose who has the closest birthday, who's the oldest, who had the most recent poop, Bloodsport style kumite, or any number of other choices. But once you decide who that is, you're going to grab the box that you set to the side before, look at the instructions on the side flap, and fold it to create your very own first player token. And then you're going to set it in front of that player. Congratulations! You are now set up and ready to play Pass the Anthrax. Now that that's finally out of the way, let's move on to how to play the game. The first rule of gameplay is that if you have a letter in front of you, you must play a card. If you don't have a playable card, then you must discard one. Keeping that in mind, we move on to player 1's turn. Looking at their hand, they have a right 2 and a left 1. Both of these cards are playable, so they can choose which one they want to play. They decide to play the right 2. They place the card in the discard pile and then move their letter 2 players to the right. But it looks like this player has a return card. Return cards can only be played in defense when being given a letter. Since they played a return card, the player that tried to give them the letter must now take back the letter and open it themselves. Luckily, this time they survived. Set the revealed letter to the side and out of play. Since the player no longer has a letter in front of them, their turn is over. So the turn order flows to the player on their left. This player has a For You and an Everyone. Both are playable, but an Everyone makes everyone open their letters, which means they would have to open the letter in front of them. The For You, however, allows you to pass off a letter and make another player open it. So instead of taking the chance on themselves, they decide to play the For You. They then place the For You card in the discard pile and give another player their letter and force them to open it. That player has no defense, so they must open it. Fortunately, they survived. set the revealed letter to the side, out of play, and continue on. Since the current player no longer has a letter in front of them, their turn is now over, and turn flow moves to the left again. But since this player used the return earlier to defend themselves, they now only have one card left, and it's an everyone. Since it is a playable card, it has to be played. Everyone must now open any letters they have in front of them. Fortunately, this player survives, but the next player isn't quite so lucky. Oh wait, they had the gas mask, which protects them from being killed by anthrax. This means we start over again from the top. Since the anthrax was revealed, all players pass in their letters. Add back in enough you survived cards to bring the number of letters back up to the total number of living players, which in this case is 4. 3 you survived cards and 1 anthrax. Shuffle them face down and deal 1 to each living player. All players discard their hands, shuffle them, and then deal 2 to each player again. Move the first player token 1 player to the left, and start again. Looking at their hand, the new first player realizes they have a return and an everyone. They can't play the return because returns can only be played if someone tries to give you a letter. But the everyone, as we discussed, is playable and has to be played. They play their everyone card, and now everyone must open their letters. This time the player with the anthrax isn't quite lucky enough to have the gas mask, so they are eliminated. Since the anthrax was revealed, all letters are passed in. Now we remove 1 you survived card from play. Since we now have 3 players left, we need 2 you survived cards and 1 anthrax card, totaling 3 letters. Shuffle them face down and deal 1 to each living player. Players then discard all of their non-letter cards. Since there are now only 3 players, we have to remove any non-letter cards that have a number in the lower right of the picture that is higher than 3. Shuffle the remaining cards and deal 2 to each living player. You will have 2 left over. Place these in the discard pile. Pass the first player token to the next living player on the left, and we're ready for turn 3. Looking at their hand, it appears player 1 doesn't have any playable cards. Returns can only be used when someone tries to give you a letter, and the gas mask can only be used if you reveal the anthrax. So, they have to discard 1. They place the return in the discard pile and hold on to the gas mask, just in case they end up with the anthrax. The next player has a 4U and a right 1. They play the 4U and pass their letter to this player, who has a return. So they take their letter back and open it. Fortunately for them, they're safe. Set the revealed letter to the side and out of play. The next player now only has 1 card left, and it's a left 1. So they pass their letter to the left 1 player, and since this player discarded their return card, they no longer have any defense against this and must take the letter. We have now made it 1 full round without anyone dying, or the anthrax being revealed. Since the anthrax wasn't revealed, the letters are not collected and instead stay where they are. But since each player had a turn, the first player token must now switch players. Anytime the first player token switches players, everyone discards all their non-letter cards, they are shuffled, and then each living player is dealt 2 cards, even if you don't have a letter in front of you. You will have 2 cards left over, as usual. Place them in the discard pile. At the top of turn 4, the new player 1 has no letters in front of them, so their turn is skipped. Same goes for player 2. Player 3, however, has 2 letters and 2 playable cards. They play a left 1. Player 1 has no defense, so they must take the letter. Even though player 3 played a card and passed a letter, they still have a letter in front of them. and another playable card, so if they choose, they can keep going. They play a right one, but that player has a return, so they must take back the letter and open it. Fortunately, they survive. But now we know where the anthrax is. Anytime the anthrax is revealed or its location becomes known, discard all letters, gather a number equal to the number of living players, ensuring one of them is the anthrax, shuffle them face down and deal 1 to each living player. Then all players discard their hands, shuffle the discard pile, deal 2 cards to each living player. You, as usual, have 2 cards left over, put them in the discard pile, and then pass the first player token to the next player on the left. Player 1 only has 1 playable card, so they played for you. Player 2 plays a return, but player 1 also has a return. And since you can play a return on a return, player 2 must take the letter and open it. Looks like it's the anthrax. Player 2 is dead. There are now only 2 players left alive. Remove a "you survived" letter from play so that you now only have 1 anthrax and 1 you survived. Shuffle them face down and place 1 in front of each living player. All players discard their hands. Since the number of players changed, remove any cards needed so that the only remaining cards match the number of current living players, meaning any cards numbered higher than 2 are removed. Shuffle them and deal 2 to each living player. Move the first player token to the next living player on the left, and we're ready for the next turn. Player 1 is feeling lucky, so they decide to play their everyone, and it looks like it pays off. They are now the last player left alive, making them the winner. Congratulations! You have now seen a full game of Pass the Anthrax. You should now have all the information you need to jump in and start playing Pass the Anthrax. If you run into anything that you don't understand or you aren't sure of, there's a larger print, more in-depth instruction manual, and consistently updated FAQ on my website. If you run into something that's not addressed in either of those, or you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me via my email. Please follow me on social media to keep up to date with what's going on, because there's still plenty of stuff to come. I'm just getting started. Thank you so much for your interest in my game, and I hope you have as much fun playing it as I did creating it. I'm Ray, and thank you for checking out Pass the Anthrax.